experimenting with. This is what we're calling the Trainman Report. So as you all know, Alex over here, he actually reads stuff. He does the thing that all of us on the internet pretend to do when we share our articles and links. I mean, don't get me wrong, I read stuff, but I don't read stuff like Alex reads stuff. I don't go into the nitty gritties and the sublines and when I see the graphs and the policy things, I'll be real, I often just stop paying as much attention and skip to the next paragraph, whereas Alex will be like, let me take a look at this and see if it makes sense. And well, everyone in Thrive NDG, at least, because I'm not gonna lie, that is who I think the most target of this video is, has whatever opinion they want. I think we can all agree that we know Alex really does read stuff. So with that, I also saw that Alex went to the city council meeting recently that just passed, and I know I did not go to the city council meeting, and I'm sure most of you watching this also did not go to the city council meeting, because as much as we love to have opinions on civic stuff, do we really go and play our part in the process? We do not. Let's be real. So let's talk to somebody who was actually there, and you can kind of give us a little bit of an update on what's going on in NDG. And I kind of want to turn this into an ongoing thing because, like I said, I don't think most people care about this borough as much as Alex does. And the train man is here, and he has his vibrant energy. And yeah, so tell us a bit about like what are the bigger stuff going on in NDG. I know for me, the hot topic right now is the Terrebonne bike path, but you can just tell us what you think about that, and then we can go from there.
You flatter me incredibly. I do read things, but I am like most people. I can only absorb so much, and
Right.
we all have busy lives, right? So, but following the municipal scene has been sort of like a hobby of mine, a passion. And but let's delve into it right now. Let's get back to the Terrebonne bike path. So during the Sue Montgomery administration, if you remember correctly, that fiasco, and I'm not here to assign blame. It was just a fiasco in general. I think everybody was responsible, myself included to a certain degree. So there, I'll own that. And so Sue Montgomery tried to implement a Terrebonne bike path on Terrebonne, and that initially had the support of her Projet Montreal colleagues, and but because she had a falling out with Projet Montreal, it seems like politics came into play, partisan politics came into play, and that project was sort of torpedoed by the council as a whole. Projet Montreal saw it as an opportunity to undermine Sue Montgomery's legitimacy, credibility, and the opposition councillors Lionel Perez, and Marvin Rotran saw it as an opportunity also to undermine her credibility, to set themselves up for the next election. So here we are back again, and the borough is launching a new plan for Terrebonne, and that is obviously raising the ire of those that were opposed to it initially, and it's also being embraced by the cyclists, people who want to see the borough transformed more in a livable space in which there's a better arrangement of sharing of city infrastructure between automobilists, pedestrians, and cyclists. So and they have a presentation November 30th where they're going to present the new plan. This is a plan that they supposedly have developed with the technicians, the engineers, they say, that work for the borough. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see what this plan is, how the residents are going to respond to it, and what's going to come out of this. Is this going to be like a conversation, or is it going to be Projet Montreal imposing itself on the population and saying, well, look, no, this is something that needs to be done. And there are many, credible reasons why this could be a good project. And but the residents are rightfully concerned because, unfortunately, many of us continue to be dependent upon the automobile, and this is going to inconvenience and rob them of parking. And but I don't really think that's just the key issue. I think it's I think it's more of a issue of getting
I think
people
the
together.
parking is valid for like the strip of people who do live on Terrebonne, but like I'm gonna be real, at a democratic level, that shouldn't be the focus of the debate, in my opinion, because like
Yeah.
there's a lot more people that are affected, and this is my opinion, that are
No, no,
affected
no.
based on other stuff.
I don't
And
disagree with that
and
opinion at
I'm gonna
all.
be real because I know I got a car, like we got a car
Oh,
as of like
look at
a
you.
couple days ago,
You
so
you
like, but I'm driving up Terrebonne for like, and now I'm having it because I've always been a cyclist guy. And then I'm on Terrebonne, and I'm like, damn, this is a narrow street.
It's
This is
very
not.
narrow.
It's not a wide street. It's not.
And
It's not.
no. And the other problem with Terrebonne is that it's got quite a grade. So you're cycling, you're climbing uphill or you're going downhill, and but you're not climbing uphill or downhill perpendicular to the slope. You're like kind of running parallel of it, and
Right.
I find it a challenging street to ride. Or with a bike, and I find it even more challenging to ride on when you're on a trike. We won't talk
Right.
about that. A tricycle
Man.
on Terrebonne is really not a pleasant experience because you always feel like you're going to topple over.
I mean, there's a lot of the road infrastructure, regardless of the bike paths or not, where you feel like you're gonna topple over.
Yeah, the Maison bike path leaves a lot to be desired. It's really like getting kind of like a rough shape now. They repaved Sherbrooke, which is a significant improvement. They repaved Fielding, which that was way overdue.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like our streets in NDG. A lot of them are like you know they're rough, but you know but bike on back on the Terrebonne bike path. This is not an easy thing to accomplish. Or a task to do. I do sympathize with the counselors in trying to find the right balance. It's not going to be easy. I am very, very concerned that this issue is going to divide us as a community once again. And I don't think that's going to be a very productive exercise. We need to all find a way to move forward. There are going to be, I believe, compromises are going to have to be made, but people's voices need to be heard in this process.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. As much as I do see divisiveness happening, this may incentivize people to actually care more about local politics, at least for a minute. Because, like, if you're mad about something and you're mad at the other side, I know how ridiculous this sounds, but now you care. Now you're like, who's the mayor anyway? Who do I complain to? How do I get my voice out? And so, like, let's go at this a different way. Because, like, whether or not you're pro or against this project, I saw a Facebook group appear. Shout out, Erwin. I see you out there doing your democratic duties. And that's not shots fired. It's just a fact. He created a Facebook group and collected 187 people that are opposed to the bike path. And then it looks like there's a pro bike path Facebook group too. Does all of this count towards anything? Or is this all going to just be kind of ignored by the city?
Oh, I definitely think it counts for something, and it goes back to your earlier point that people start to care and getting themselves engaged in the community conversation. And I think that's important. And we're going to disagree as a community. We will always disagree. Um, the hope is that we all need to, I believe, make an effort, myself included. Right, I own that as well. That we need to talk to each other and listen to each other, and sometimes that's very hard because sometimes we get entrenched in positions or ideas or concepts, and we're kind of like talking to each other, but we're not listening to each other. And that is problematic that I think we all experience collectively, and it's not unique to NDG or I think it's something that's you see worldwide. So I always say, think globally, act locally, and I think this is one way we can work. As a community, it's hard. It's not going to be easy. There'll be like road bumps along the way. But to start having a community conversation and arguing is okay. I think that we all need to like accept that is one of the elements in nature of living as a human being. We are political animals. I actually take as I get really what really is a pet peeve. It burns. I mean, excuse me, grinds my gears is when people say, "Oh, I don't want to be political," and I'm sorry, you live in a community, a society. You know, the drains that hook up to your house, the water that's brought into your faucets. You know, you're paying tax bills to the city of Montreal. You're like a subject, a citizen. In the state of Canada or the nation state of Canada and in the province of Quebec, you're a political animal. You can never escape that reality. So that's kind of my mantra. And I never shy away from that. I used to when I was younger because, you know, they always say, oh, you're not supposed to talk about politics. And I beg to differ. I think, yeah, there, you know, obviously there's a time and place that you shouldn't be talking about politics, but I think these are conversations we need to have. So, yeah. So, you know, I just hope that, uh, you know, this doesn't, you know, really polarize us in a destructive way. We need to find a way forward, right?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, Facebook is not real life. And while people may come at each other's throats on the internet all the time, like, I'm not afraid of a single person that doesn't like me on Facebook, Thrive NDG. Not one of them makes me feel anything in my soul. In fact, I shared this live to Thrive NDG because I'm like, yo, let's argue more. Let's go. Let's actually create some discourse. I mean,
I think social media is great. I agree with you 100%. I think that, yeah, there are some negative elements, you know, to social media. I guess the thing that troubles me the most are individuals. I call them trolls. I think that trolls is kind of the word we're using to describe this kind of personality on social media that are just there to create division. And instead of engaging in a conversation that's productive, they're just trying to sort of like throw wrenches in the machine because it suits their political like agenda. And I don't really think that's productive behavior, but you know, it's out there and we got to deal with it, right?
honestly,
And
I would say it's a matter of perspective. You have to learn to dance with the trolls because it's
yes,
really a game. And I'm gonna
I
be
just
real
ignore
with
them now.
like
I just
everybody
ignore
out
them.
there. If
I
you're
really,
like
I really don't think they're going to
trying
be. Yes, go
to
ahead. Sorry.
pop on social media for whatever reason, if you're trying to be engaging, answer the trolls. Just keep answering them. They're doing your work for you. One of the features in a community group is a filter, most recent activity. Feed the trolls. Your post will consistently go back up to the top of it. And I know that like it seems weird, but like why are you gonna let somebody in, honestly, the regular community group who's just like, you know, sometimes I wake up in the morning, I don't have my coffee yet, and I read something about something, and I'm just like, I'm ready. And I make my little comments, and then I read them 5 hours later, and I feel bad. Like that's just the, you know, that's how it works on social media. I don't even, sometimes I read what I wrote, and I'm like, oh, she's like 70. Why did I say that? Like, you know, like I have this, like, we gotta just not let anybody on social media who's probably just venting in those moments there. And you may be really passionate on social media, but if anybody's really about it, they're going to go canvas and get, like what I learned, because we did the interview run in the last NDG election, and I learned that if anybody's really serious about it, they're getting signatures on whatchamacallits, the surveys or whatever, not the surveys, when you go petition to get people to sign for your cause. I forgot the word for it.
It's not GoFundMe. It's like what's the other petition? Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But like you can apparently just walk around with a piece of paper and collect 250 signatures of people that support your cause, and if you can get their postal codes, that'll actually carry some weight to make your stuff get taken more seriously. But what people do instead is go online and just, like, people don't do the groundwork. So it's like, yeah, if y'all want to make change, you have to become more politically involved and more included in the process, or you're really just talking to a Facebook group of 15,000 people that are there for the same reason that we're all there for, general entertainment / information.
Saying that, and next Sunday there's going to be a protest at the Treadhome Park at 1 o'clock in the afternoon against you know, the current hostile environment in which many of us find ourselves in Quebec. You know, province that's now being governed by a nationalist government that's pushing an agenda of identity politics. So, we all like to and I do it. We all like to be comment online about how we're frustrated, upset, especially with the Old Orchard affair scandal, as I call it. And but here is a real circumstance where we could stand up and do something tangible. Is it going to change our world? No, it's not, but it's a step, and it will demonstrate to our elected representatives, or those who say they represent us, that this is an issue that the community is concerned about, and hopefully, that modifies their behavior in a way in which accommodates or addresses our needs. So I hereby calls all able bodies who are listening to this podcast to please come out November 19th at 1:00 at Trenholm Park and make your presence known. Show Quebec, show Canada that we're a community, we're a culture, and we would like to live in Quebec and feel welcomed and not be constantly under assault by a number of policies and legislations, language silliness.
So let's just focus in a bit.
That's
using
a rant.
language
that was a rant right there.
No, that's fair. Using language like tyrannical government and identity politics is vague, and that will confuse people. So to make it more specific, can you just describe what happened with Old Orchard? I know it happened, and for a lot of people, it might not be news per se, but just for anyone watching this in the future, take a second to kind of delve into what you mean by using that as a leverage point to show your example of how the government is attacking people, so to speak.
Well, Old Orchard is a manifestation.
And just assume that people watching this might not come from Quebec and might not know what Bill 101 is when you're explaining it.
Yeah, this is about Bill 101 and Bill 96. So in Quebec, there's been this narrative that's been driven by nationalist Quebec governments that the French culture, the French language is under assault, it's under attack, and they need to impose these restrictions and laws in order to limit the use of particularly the language of English. The problem with that is that it's consistently been marginalizing the Anglophone communities in Montreal and in Quebec that have been important partners and neighbors and friends to the Francophones that helped build this province. And Old Orchard was approached. We have, believe it or not, in Quebec, if you're not from Quebec, we have language police, right?
That's a real thing.
It's a real thing. They approached Old Orchard, which is a pub in the English style, located on the intersection of Old Orchard and Monkland, if I remember correctly.
See, I got to keep in mind
it's really close to Old Orchard.
The street name it's on, or right
Yeah.
next to, is called Old Orchard.
That's correct. And according to the OLF, that sign, Ye Old Orchard, was in violation of the language laws that exist in the province of Quebec. And but this manifests itself in different ways. For example, the Suburban just launched an article today about how signs around the swimming pool at Benny Recreation Center in the had English in small type below the French, and the OLF asked them to remove the English, and these were signs warning swimmers of potential risks. And just imagine, right, that you have a sign, 8.5 by 11. You're talking about a regular piece of paper with a French and English message on it, the English being smaller. And
which, just so that people are aware for context, there's technically, if you're going to have both languages, French has to be at least twice as big as English.
That's right.
That's a real thing.
And imagine that there's two things here. Imagine the Quebec government trying to impose this kind of really kind of restrictive legislation on us, which really doesn't address us as a community and serve our needs. But our elected representatives and the administration complying with that request, it's a double whammy. It's like not only are we existing under this in this hostile environment as it relates to minorities, and included in that are Anglophones, the Italians who speak primarily
I
English.
know this sounds kind of wild to y'all, but just to add on to what Alex is saying, the Premier of Quebec literally labeled historic Anglos as a minority. Like, we have a whole label and everything according to the guy. So, like, it sounds so preposterous, but it's also technically official. Like, this is a world where I'm a minority.
This is the language they're using in this province. It's and we not only do our elected representatives say very little or raise any. I haven't heard any of our elected officials really stand up against it. And I could name names if you want me to, and they
I
have not.
mean, I don't think it has value.
But none of them have stood up and said anything about it. They're in fact they've been quite compliant about the whole ordeal or the whole trend. And to make matters worse is that what happened is when Bill 101 was introduced, Côte-Neige NDG lost a lot of people. A lot of people left our borough because the current political situation was just untenable to them. They went elsewhere. I have stories of friends that I've lost, of family members that I've lost, have left the province because they
Right.
just didn't see a future for themselves here. And what happened is that the population of CDNEG dropped, and by consequence, new arrivals, immigrants filled up that void. But that changed the demographic nature of the borough. The borough was an Anglophone borough.
So I'm just gonna, yeah, because like just so people know, when you come to Quebec as an immigrant, you're basically obliged to learn French, like within a year or something along those lines. I might be off on those details.
Yes, there are programs in place to they call it excuse me, I just whacked my desk, to francisize the population. So but the big, I guess, the point I'm trying to hit home is that when the boroughs were created in 2002 under the Tremblay administration, CDNG was not provided bilingual status, and this is a major failing in terms of the elected representatives of the time.
Like, but how would they get that? Like, do they have the final say, or does Quebec has the final say? Because sometimes I see stuff like Montreal politicians talking about. Here's an example. Ballarat Mahomes, if I'm not mistaken, when he was running with the Montreal campaign, was really adamant about the fact that he was going to advocate for being a special city-state in Montreal, in the midst of a CAQ majority where there was like literally never going to happen. It was a 0% chance of success no matter what he did if he got elected in all majorityness, because Quebec, I looked it up, Quebec owns Montreal in the context of having full autonomy to release the state, making every conversation anybody ever had about this city-state special status thing like a literal waste of time, because it's kind of ignoring the actual reach of what, I mean, maybe there's an advocacy play, because I know you're into the advocacy. To me, like, there's so many other things that were issues at the time. Like, nobody talk about homelessness, but they're going to talk about a special city state and like something that's not possible. Like, everything that was described was impossible. So the manifestation as it was not real.
Yeah, these are all fair criticisms that you, or concerns that you raise. In terms of you're correct. Cities are creations of the province. So legally, in the legal framework, a city needs the Quebec government's stamp to literally exist. Without it, it doesn't exist. But that doesn't mean that we can't collectively work as a community, or our elected representatives can't stand up and say, no, this is not acceptable.
Right.
This neighborhood is the borough is a traditionally Anglophone neighborhood. We have a significant Anglophone population, and that needs to be respected. And we need to find a vehicle within, the framework in which the province dictates, laws and regulations for us to accommodate the needs of the community. And this is not what's happening. What's happening, quite frankly, is that the provincial officials or the government of the day, and also the city for that matter, Projet Montreal, because I asked Projet Montreal, I've already planned directly twice if she would support bilingual status for Côte-de-Neige and NDG, and both times I asked the question, she refused to do so. So it's a question. What to me, what's happening is that the city and the province have a vision of what we should be, and they want us to be that. And I'm like, well, why can't we just be who we are? We're cool people, right? You're cool, right? I think we have a very cool and great community. People walk down the street in NDG, they say hi to people, they're friendly. We have a great dynamic in this neighborhood in terms of people from all different parts of the world living together in harmony. We're an example, as far as I'm concerned, for the world. And I just find it tragic that the city wants us to be something they want us to be and doesn't want to accept us for what we are. So this is my big contention.
I mean, that's a fair point. And I think that sometimes I'll be honest, when you kind of go off a little bit, there's a lot of sentimentality into it, and I love it because you're right. NDG is a beautiful and wonderful place. For real. Sorry, 1 second. Beautiful and wonderful place. But on the other hand, the swimming pool thing you brought up is a legitimate attack on English people. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, the thing is the yield orchard thing.
It's all over.
But those are things.
Yeah.
But those are the things that we don't see. So sometimes what I find really knowledgeable people do is they forget that the rest of the world don't got the mundane details. So like I know about the yield orchard thing because it's big headline news. Unpopular opinion, it's debatable how big of a deal it is. It sucks for the merchant and the business and the community, and I'm aware of how expensive signs are, and I've had this conversation. It was made very clear to me an itinerary of expenses they're about to face over some honestly dumb stuff. I don't know why Best Buy gets to be Best Buy, but they have to change their name. I don't know exactly what all these distinctions are. I remember it was a big deal, and the mega corporations won and didn't have to change all their names, but then some did.
Because the corporations operate under Canadian federal legislation, and that's outside the jurisdiction of provincial jurisdiction. That's how they can get away with it. They found a way to make it work for them, to the chagrin to the Quebec government. Like if you talked representative of the Quebec government, they would say they're unhappy with that arrangement. They would like these merchants to operate here in French. But you go to France and it's like Best Buy is Best Buy, right? They don't, like, the French just understand, the French from France, I say, would just understand that they live in a wider world, and things are what they are, and it's not necessarily a threat to their culture. Cultures are constantly evolving, and we are exposed to influences from a variety of different sources, being linguistic, fashion, art, style, food. To me, it's a beautiful thing that needs to be celebrated. I think that when the government gets involved in deciding cultural preferences, this is always kind of gone down a road that's ended badly.
I'm gonna have to go 50-50 on that. Let's be real. There's almost no Canadian art scene without government intervention. Like, if we're being completely candid,
I'm not saying so the government shouldn't be supporting arts. No. You're misunderstanding. No, but it's like the government shouldn't be telling people what kind of art they should be making or what form it should take. That's fair. To me, the art form and the expression should happen naturally based upon the environmental circumstances in which.
However, the only other thing I can say, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. This is just because I think it's important.
Well, we all know you're a devil there.
Take the radio law that mandates that 30% of the content, or it might be more now, has to be Canadian content. Yes. That is in direct contradiction to the idea of letting the markets naturally dictate the arts, because let's be real, without that 30% mandated stuff, there are a lot of Canadian classics that would not be Canadian classics today because they never would have got radio time in support of whatever other American stuff would have taken the charts. And in an effort to preserve culture via legislation, it has in fact boosted. We have Drake. Drake is a byproduct of that, and he is now like the number one thing on the world in terms of music, whether or not anyone likes it. So you have this random Canadian that managed to pivot to global significance, legitimizing a lot of Canadian culture as a result of direct government intervention. Now, again, I'm not saying I agree with Quebec. Trust, I got all my beef with Legault and the Quebecs and all that. But I kind of respect the idea of conserving culture via legislation because there are use cases where it has effective success. I just don't think the implementation of Quebec makes any sense because they're trying to beat us with a stick rather than offering like honey and candy and stuff to attract us. Like, in my opinion, the ideal French campaign, if you really want Anglophones to speak French, and it's not necessarily safe for work, but you put a lot of people of the opposite genders looking beautiful and go, more than 50% of the population speaks this language, increase your likelihood of getting some. Watch how the whole province speak French real soon. Real soon.
And you know what? It's ironic that
everybody
you say that.
Tempted and seduced by it because l'amour et tout ça.
I love you.
And I know it's not like, I know it's not what anyone in the Catholic driven place of Quebec is ever going to come and say, because whether or not anyone likes it, this entire province, in my perception,
you speak truth,
has the equivalent of daddy issues from Catholic school. That's what the province is going through right now, down to deep weirdo repression stuff and all that kind of, that's because y'all may not know me, but I have an abstract perception through the idea of trying to study art marketing and what makes people fascinated by art. And when you really look into it, you start to look like, why are artists in Quebec so sad? Why is Quebec folk music so sad and broken? And it really is. Go listen to it. It's like we have the saddest music in North America, 100%.
One of the highest suicide rates in North America as well. But backing up on your earlier point, one of the ways that my French improved like exponentially in my early adult years is because I did have a French Acadian girlfriend, Céline Forêt. She was very pretty, very nice. I still,
all of a sudden, you don't see French the same.
I still think of her.
I know it's preposterous when you say it like this, but
with her red hair, she was very beautiful. Yeah.
And now Alex speaks French, and that, like, it sounds so corny.
Well,
but if you think about people and hormones,
right,
the science is there. Okay. Look at your pop music, America.
We have to stop this conversation because I have a bad feeling I'm going to get myself into trouble. But
you're all right. You're playing safe.
but going on, like,
so is this really? Let's just bring it back to your protest for a second. Your protest is really to kind of keep the government from trampling on Anglophone rights, or like what exactly is the focus of it?
That's a very good question, because what I'm concerned about and what I've seen in the past is that it becomes into an Anglo-Franco issue, and I don't really see it as a Franco-Anglo issue anymore. I think it's a question of the respect of the many different minorities that make up of the city of Montreal, be them Anglophones, be them the Filipinos, the Italians, the Greeks, and we collectively, have we all have stories, right, of our parents, our grandparents, depending upon how long your family has been in this beautiful city. And if you listen to those stories are stories of diversity. And for example, my grandfather is Italian, but my mother is of French Canadian descent or Quebecois descent, if you want to say it. And her great grandmother was Irish. And I've got Langlois in my family name, Potvin, Early, Delazio, Montagano, and when I hear the stories of my parents and their grandparents, and it's a story of different people working together to achieve the goals, the collective goals, and also individual goals. And I think that unfortunately, in the nasty linguistic politics of Quebec, that gets lost. And I really see People should know that I'm a student, graduate of McGill in politics and economics, and I did my postgraduate studies in business management. So I really see this linguistic insecurity being basically the flames being kind of like blown by our political elected officials, because they can use this leverage. They can use it as leverage to maintain power, and they can use it as leverage to secure resources from the larger state of Canada that essentially right now is just trying to buy the peace, and really has abandoned the minorities in Quebec in a wholesale way. They are not interested in defending us. There's a Facebook group called it's a history page called Montreal, an Inconvenient Truth, and it's basically they share stories. It's a very popular. A lot of historical pages in Montreal are very popular, and I was actually thinking to myself, why are historical pages so popular in Montreal? And I believe it has to do with the fact that a lot of people want to share these stories that they have that do not fit into like the existing narrative of what Quebec and what Montreal is from our elected or the authorities want us to believe it is. And a lot of the participants on these historical pages don't live in Montreal. They left, but they're there sharing the stories of their youth, their parents, their family histories, because I think that they need to tell these stories. They need to share these stories because they're real. They existed, and these people, these communities exist like the way we exist. And I am very concerned that what the soul of NDG, the essence of what it is we are as a community, is going to be lost unless we collectively come together as a community and say no. We have a great culture. We have a lot to share in Montreal. We have been significant contributors to the success and the prosperity of the city of Montreal.
So your protest is less about
I'm
like
rambling.
convention. No, it's good. It's good. Your protest is less about conventional identity politics. I think the way most people understand the term, to be honest. I think you're really just trying to remind people like what our community is, as opposed to necessarily
we're cool. Like we need to celebrate that, and we need to take local control. And this is a problem right now with the political environment in which we exist. We do not have effective control over affairs. We're electing people who belong to political parties whose narratives are really and policy decisions are really not in our best interest. In fact, they're worse than that. They are effectively squeezing us out of, in my mind, out of existence. It's kind of historical revisionism that's happening, and we don't just see it with signs at swimming pools and signs on bars. We see it in a variety of different ways, right? Like the most glaring example is the attempt of the Projet Montréal administration to name the Griffintown REM station Bernard Landry. It's just a really disconnect with the historical reality of the district and the quartier and the people that live and used to live there. So I think that this is what the protest is about.
yeah.
One of the many reasons what the protest is about. And we could talk about Bill 96. We could talk about the new policies and legislation related to foreign students attending English universities. You see, these are English universities are Anglophone
Those are
institutions.
those are definitely more like Quebec issues, right? Like, just to be clear, these are things where like
it's an attack. It's an attack on Anglophone institutions. The EMSB is taking the Quebec government to court because they want to operate. They want to work in English. Well, they're an English institution. Why wouldn't they work in English? They want them to work in French. I just like you see this manifested in so many different ways. Just small little. You think, oh, it's not important, but to me, it's a cumulative effect, right? Even they put a bonjour in the old port, which is Canada land, by the way, belongs to the federal government. They don't have any, they don't do bonjour hi. It's like, it's always this kind of like, oh, we don't want to offend the sovereigntists and nationalists and this. So let's let's just do the bonjour and yeah. And, it's an oversight, right?
I mean, so like I'm kind of like, so when I hear about the bonjour sign, I'm gonna be real. To me, it's like whatever. It's tourism. Like to me, that doesn't have the same impact as swimming pool instructions for safety being taken away.
No, but like I said, it's a combination of things. For example, if you're an Anglophone tourist that you come off an airplane and you're at Pierre Elliott Trudeau airport and you exit, and before the taxi said bonjour hi. Oh, it's kind of cool. Bonjour hi. Yeah, we're in Montreal, and Montreal. I agree with Balarama Holmes on this point. Montreal, in essence, is a bilingual city. And
I would absolutely give it the fact that there's enough Anglophones here that we count, or at least pretty much everybody I know under the age of 35, 40, we all speak both languages, and most of the language divide is honestly like an old person issue, in my opinion. I don't meet a lot of people my age or younger that don't speak French and English. In fact, like we go out of our way to speak both. So sometimes I'm like,
I do business in English. I do business in French all the time.
Like I get more worried about my parents and stuff than I mean. Don't get me wrong. I want my medical in English. Give me my medical in English. And from what I understand, I can still have my medical in English. But on the other hand, if I do go to the middle of nowhere, Quebec, where 18 people in total speak English, I can't be shocked if the doctor don't speak no English at me.
Absolutely not. But you'd be surprised. I had a fire at the cottage, which is located in, in a very, very francophone based community. And the firemen arrived here, and I was like talking in my joie of French Quebecois and having conversations with them. And the fire chief looked at me and he goes, "Hey, so you got a problem here, right?" I couldn't believe it. So, I think that a large part of the Francophone population, Quebecois, even for that matter, nationalists and sovereigntists, when you get them on a one-to-one level and you're talking to them and they see that you're distressed or you're in a bad spot, and if they feel that they can make your life easier by speaking English, or for that matter, if you're struggling talking to them, you can't find the right word in French, they in turn sometimes have the hard time finding the right word in English, but we kind of find a way to make it work, right? And Montreal is about that. It's like there were Francophones, the Anglophones, the Scots, the Irish, the Filipinos, the Greeks.
Honestly, it's not even just Montreal. Like, I've been to Sherbrooke. I've been to all these other cities.
We made it work.
I go to places, especially with music. I go and rap in English and other. I've taken the city of Sherbrooke's tour artistic cultural money to rap in English in the city of Sherbrooke. Like, it's like, nah, people are pretty okay with it. Yeah. It's just like the government and the news and the people who focus heavily on the government and the news tend to be a little more politicized. And don't get me wrong, I don't know what it's like across most of Quebec, because I know Sherbrooke's not exactly the Frenchest place. No. I'm aware that when you look at a political map, it looks exactly like what it looks like in Quebec, and that Montreal, even at a nominal level, only represents 25% of the population of Quebec. Granted, the greater Montreal area covers more, but it also gets less English the more greater Montreal area you go. So we only are about 25% of the total population in Quebec. Even at a populist vote, we would still lose in the majority. That's just the reality of Quebec's demographics. But a lot of that stuff is still...
That's a whole other conversation, right? Because the regions in Quebec, the way the political system has been designed over the years, from what my research has shown me, and I still maintain this, perspective, is that the regions hold greater weight in elections in Quebec than the island.
It's not just Quebec. I was talking to my guy in New York. He says it's the exact same thing. New York City goes through the same thing with New York State, because there's almost no way to draw a map up where the people in the city get as much voting power as the people in the country. And then if otherwise, the other way around is the farmers get ignored, and then it's the opposite conversation. So it's really just one side gets screwed in the current first past the post system. All that being said, that's provincial. In terms of other stuff,
I do have one point to make.
Okay. Go for it.
Okay. When I was in McGill University, I actually took a political science course that was taught by a UCAM professor, and it was in French, believe it or not. And one of the things that he commented on is that, unlike Toronto, where the provincial capital is in Toronto, Quebec, the provincial capital is in Quebec City. And Montreal is, he felt, so he was as pure laine Québécois as you could get, right? He felt that the problem, one of the problems, political problems for Montreal, was that because the provincial capital wasn't in the major metropole, being Montreal, the economic engine of the province, that played negatively for us, in the sense that our priorities, our needs weren't addressed in the way that they should be. Because don't forget that as the economic engine of the province, the whole province of Quebec benefits from our success, right? We're the urban kind of machine that's consuming all these goods and resources, foodstuffs from the regions. So he actually raised that in that class, and
that's a great point too.
Yeah. And he also weed laws. He also mentioned what you described before as his idea of how to get Anglophone young men to learn French.
I'm sorry. Does anybody have teenagers? I don't even have kids, and I know what teenagers be, because I was one too. We was all teenagers. We all know exactly. Anyway, that's why a lot of people in the younger population speak English, because the people they wanted to intercourse with and crushed on made English music or whatever. That's just a fact. Y'all can argue, but I would be willing to bet money that the stats support what I'm saying. Because, like, hormones. The whole music industry is driven in North America on sex. So, like, everyone can act like, oh my gosh, this is inappropriate. But, like, it's just some real talk. But, like, you can see how, like, the impact of what you were saying with Quebec versus Montreal is there. And one of the main differences is Quebec's a lot of houses and Montreal's a lot of apartments. And I'd say there's probably a much larger percentage of renters on island here compared to homeowners versus, say, Quebec City, where I recently went, and I was like, damn, this is not Montreal. It is like the suburbs, and that's the whole thing, is the suburbs. Like, there's very few buildings. There is a little downtown, but it's just the suburbs and a bridge. It's a really nice bridge.
And a very homogeneous community, right? It's
I couldn't speak to that, but I would assume that it is less multicultural.
It's very homogeneous, right? So,
but then again, I'm also pretty sure
politics,
that
right?
the immigration that is happening here is impacting them as well. Like, there's no way that they're not becoming.
In the last 10 years, you're correct. There's been a lot of immigrants that are now making themselves or making their way to the regions and into Quebec City. But, it was a CAC minister that said all the immigrants come to Montreal and speak English and don't learn French. I quote him. He's the one who said that. So,
but
so yeah, it's a quagmire. Politics is never easy.
I did want to come back to, like, what else was talked about at the town hall. Like, I don't even know what else they talk about in town halls.
There was, like, the council meeting you're referring to, right?
Yeah.
There were, obviously the elected representatives made sure that a lot of the supporters for the bike path were there, which is fine. And there were quite a few people who were opposed to the bike path that was there. The problem, one of the problems that was raised in the process of that council meeting is that what the rules of the council meeting do is they limit only 3 questions per subject. And there seemed to have been, like, what seemed to happen was there were 2 supporters that were asked questions in support of the bike path, and the people who were opposed to the bike path felt kind of like, well, that's not so fair, because we only had one person was allowed to ask a question, then you shut the subject down. So that was not well received. And then I was there asking questions about the budget, of course, and that was a stressful engagement, to say the least.
What happened?
uh, I came to ask a very simple question based on the data presented by the borough on the budget, and
Right.
the elected officials and the civil service just either they didn't they um, um, didn't want to tell me why, or they didn't know why. And I was very surprised because my question was um, about the central transfer received from the city. Um, Valerie Plant announced a 2% index, I mean 2% increase. So when they say index, it means the increase of the central transfers to the borough of CD and NDG. And we, based
What
on
does
the
that
document,
mean?
that
What is
means
essential transfer to the borough of NDG?
okay, so we give a whole bunch of taxes downtown, right? So when we get our tax
Right.
bill, we pay taxes, and the largest portion, the biggest portion of that amount goes downtown to the city of Montreal. And what's happened is now the boroughs are imposing local borough taxes. So we have two sets of taxes. We have taxes we pay to Valerie Plant, and we have taxes that we pay to the borough of CDNEG. So
So which
basically,
taxes? This is like housing taxes. Like who's
yes,
paying these taxes?
property taxes. Property owners are paying, but renters are paying these taxes too. It's manifested in your rents. Don't think that as a renter you're not paying municipal property tax. Absolutely, 100%. Talk to any landlord, and they'll tell you, well, I got a $10,000 tax bill. That has to be assumed by the rental. The cost of rental. I
Which
can't
they
pay
can
that.
do legally and increase your rent.
Absolutely. Well, it's a
So all the
cost.
people that are
It's a
like,
cost.
oh, conventionally your rent goes up this percentage, that got changed. I remember that got changed as a law where they released the cap on how much they can really raise rent as long as the landlord can justify the rent increase.
That's correct. If the landlord can say, well, look, I had to invest um, $60,000 this year in new windows or this or that, or the landlord under the law technically has the right to impose a rent increase. There's guidelines on how they can do that, of course, but and tax increases too.
So that just means it's not like if it's more than 2%, you can go after them. That's not real. That's some like stuff we made up.
Excuse me?
People have like commonly believed there's a percentage cap on what they can really raise the rent on each year, and I'm like, that's not real anymore. Maybe it used to be real.
Yes and no. The Regie lists a guideline, but the landlords can raise the rent more than that if they can justify the fact that they've incurred larger than average expenses. That's what
that
I
means
understand.
like if
But
they fixed your elevator
I'm not an no, that's different. Like there's maintenance,
okay.
right? So maintenance, they can't like raise rent because of regular maintenance. It has to be some major,
So like let's say like there's some like rain causes water damage everywhere out of curiosity. Like
no, that's insurance. Insurance covers and pays
okay.
and compensates the landlord for that. They can't raise the rent because of an insurance claim. No, because
Right.
they pay part of the cost of your rent is to cover the cost the insurance and landlord pays in the event of a catastrophic event like that, and the insurance company gives them money minus obviously deductible to repair the damage. So no, I would not consider that as a viable reason to increase rent.
But if let's say they renovate, like they improve it, not necessarily
Yes.
repairs,
Improvement,
like they get a new one.
Yeah,
like they upgrade it. Like they upgraded our elevator one year. Like it was not a renovation; it was a literal upgrade of the elevator.
So technically, the landlord could argue that that's an upgrade, and he needs to pass he has to pass those costs on to the renters because it's an added benefit that they're now experiencing in the lodging. But mind you, renters can argue, say, well, I didn't want this added benefit. The reason why I came to this building is because the rent was fair,
right,
and economical for me. But I don't know how that plays out in the Regie.
I don't think people be winning.
I'm not a Regie lawyer or a judge, so I really can't comment on that with any like serious confidence. Yeah.
Right.
But
So
back on the budget though.
so we pay all this extra money, and you
Yeah.
were asking.
So we give all this money to the central city, and the central city returns money to us for our needs, to like clean our parks and provide local services, right? Pick up the garbage, that kind of stuff, and run our recreation centers, provide money to the NDG Community Council, the food bank, all that kind of stuff, right? Um, and So the city announced that they were going to have a 2% increase. And I looked at the transfer and it wasn't 2%. It was 1.29%. And I asked the question, why is it 1.29%, not 2%? And they were not able to answer the question. And it's their 2024 budget. And it's the biggest line item in their budget. It's their biggest source of revenue. And they were not able to answer that question. And I'm gobsmacked. I can't understand. Like, I'm a son of an accountant, and I've done studies and business management. I know how to read financial statements, and I just can't understand how anybody who's running the borough, right, an elected representative or a civil servant for that matter, in an executive position, cannot explain to me why our central transfer only went up 1.29% instead of 2%. There's a reason behind that. And I believe the reason behind that is because our transfer that we receive from the central city is calculated based on a formula. And that formula includes our population, right? The size of our population. And our population went down. It went down by 6,000 people between 2021 and 2023. It went down between 2021 and 2022. That's correct. And I think they're using 2022 figures to calculate the 2024 budget, because they're always a year behind. The 2003 figures came out just recently, and we're back up 3,000, but we're still a deficit of 3,000 people vis-a-vis 2021. Was that comprehensible, or is that completely?
I mean, I could just. So basically, what Alex is saying is, Valerie promised 2% money coming our way, and we got 1.29%, which at these amounts
that's what the document says, right? So I asked them,
we're talking
why?
like real amounts of money, so enough to get like 7 more park benches, or maybe your park will get its lawn mowed this time.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Just to show you what the impact is, because this is like what.
You're talking $59 million. That's like So that's 0.7%. So let's look at $59 million. Let's just calculate. It's
at least 6 figures.
59 million, right? Boom, boom, boom. That's a big number, right? And am I getting this right? Times 0.0. I think I'm supposed to go. Yeah.
Wait, it's 0.7%. 0.007 is what you're timesing.
I think it's 0.007. You're correct. So 0.07. Yeah,
0.007.
So it's $500,000.
Right, 6-figure number.
Yeah.
So where this manifests to you and why you should care, because I think this is where people get the disconnect, is a lot of y'all are mad that like the parks aren't getting their lawns mowed, and like the landscaping in your city isn't being done nicely, or all that other stuff that you guys really do complain about. It's these things is what pays for those things.
Absolutely.
And
it's the money.
I'm not here to talk about the legitimacy or illegitimacy of how money flows, except that that's the impact of it. So if you really, really do want to know when the parks are going to get cleaned up properly, like following up on these kinds of things and applying, because a lot of the provincial stuff, I'm like, whatever. That's a real uphill battle. The city stuff is mad different. Valerie is one election away from not being in charge right now, and I don't know who she goes up against, but if she has a right contender to go against, I don't think she keeps her position. So all of this stuff is subject to change, and you have the power to change, especially when the voting rate is 33% or so. That means 2 out of 3 people don't vote. So there's more people that are not voting than there are voting, and thus literally all of this is fickle, and we have a lot more power.
That figure of 33% is misleading. It's actually much lower, because it's 33% of those people who are registered to vote. It's not the actual people who are eligible to vote is much higher. So the figure is very much smaller. Only like 25 I can't remember the exact figure, but it's like only 25% of us, 25% of eligible voters in Côte-Neige NEG vote in elections. And then you have the first past the post system where the vote split between 3 or 4 candidates. So you're having people winning elections with like, 5% of eligible voters.
He's not even exaggerating. Like, you look at some of the numbers of like what some of the city councilors win by, and you're like, damn, man, that's like 6,000 people. Like, I'm not saying I could get 6,000 people to vote for me right now. But I feel like it's easier to do than like people make it sound like. Like, maybe it's harder. I don't actually know. I've never done the election cycle. But like, it seems like there's a lot of us not voting that if we voted would literally shift the balance of focus and priority in the neighborhood.
Well, that's a big question. Would it? Maybe
depends on who got in.
Maybe we would get more of the same, right? We don't know, right? I can't answer that.
I mean, I got mad inspired by the LaSalle situation because like Sterling Downey and them made their LaSalle voter block, and then LaSalle got more lit because it's like 6 unified votes on an independent party that only cares about LaSalle. And shout out Sterling Downey. That dude be like, bout it.
I think that
so there are options.
Yes, in the
that
boroughs,
the city could galvanize. Yes. But like, this would mean recognizing that party politics in Montreal is weird, because it is.
Party politics in Montreal, one of the only metropolitan centers in Canada that has parties at the municipal level, and I really think that it's an awful thing for us. It's something. If there's any older viewers watching this podcast who remember Henry Aubin, a very distinguished columnist at the Montreal Gazette, editorialist, and he used to comment on this repeatedly, how the political system, party system in the city of Montreal undermines local representation. And that's exactly what happens when you go to council in CDNEG, and it's not unique to Projet Montréal. Okay, this happened under Assemblée Montreal. It happened under Tremblay administration. When you go to the council and you're asking questions to your elected representative, whoever that may be, you'll see they follow on party lines. And the reason why they do that is because if you want to get elected in the city of Montreal, especially if you don't have an independent standing in the community, you need to tie yourself to a political party, because otherwise it's like it's almost an impossible task. I tell you, it's running as an independent or doing
Alex
what I did.
Actually would know. Like, I'm like a lot of people. Alex
like
went in.
It's political suicide. It's like it's like trying to swim against the ocean. It's like, it's really hard, and it's very frustrating for me. And I tell you, it makes me angry, and I have to work at finding vehicles to find vehicles to get this to release this frustration, because if I don't, I just lose it. Because you go to council and you're like asking yourself, when you ask questions to them, who are they working for? Are they working for us, or are they working for their political party? And you know what? When you listen to them respond to you, the answer is clear. They're working for their political party. That they're talking for their political party, and they're not talking foremost for CDNEG. It's not.
So like, what are the other topics at the council meeting that you were at? Like, so you talked about is it just kind of like an open forum? People walk in and ask questions, and that's it?
At council, you can ask any question on civic affairs if you wish to. And in fact, a lot of people ask questions that are outside the civic arena, and those will be responded to. If it depends on there's a lot of, like, how do you say, interpretation of like what's an acceptable question and what's not an acceptable question. If you ask a question that's outside the jurisdiction of the city, they may say, well, that's not our jurisdiction. That's the province's jurisdiction, which is ironic, because I'll tell you a little story. When I ran in the last municipal election, Projet Montréal was very much, one of their key platform positions was investing in social housing. If you remember correctly, they're going to build lots of social housing. And I even remember one of the candidates for mayor, Neil Muckerby, lambasting Projet Montréal, because if you did the math on the money that you would need to make the investments that Project Montreal was promising, it would be like enormous amounts. And here we are, right? And on the social housing front, it's been moving very, very slowly. It's a snail's pace. And people were like knocking on Project Montreal's door and going, hey, what's going on with all that social housing you guys promised us? And Project Montreal is going, oh, the Quebec government's not giving us the money. It's like, well, when you made the promise in the election, did you like set that up for something? And this is,
but I think that's a really important point, actually,
but this is the nature of municipal politics, right? People, politicians are saying things, and
well, that's kind of like with the point I was kind of making with Balarama. Like he was writing checks. There was a 0% chance of him cashing on that one topic.
Yeah, and I hear you. And in defense of Balarama Holness, I like Balarama Holness because I think he's fighting for a Montreal that I could like. It relates to me in what I can see Montreal as being.
Right.
And maybe from his perspective, he's saying, well, all the other parties are writing these blank checks that they could never honor anyway. So I'm going to write my own vision of what I think Montreal should be.
So to me,
I don't really think that's like. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just saying, the greater perspective, though, my problem with that is that's what it leads to, people not understanding the real division of government tiers and who's responsible for what. So, like, people now are going to accuse people of lying in election promises, become more jaded with the system, and it creates a situation where the actual issues that end up getting discussed during election time, like, they're not city problems anymore. It's like, this should be like Balarama's provincial run should have been about that. Completely fair. Then it's on pace for like what level of government you're dealing with, and to like mislead people with idealistic promises with zero plan in place. Because I did talk to certain people, and sometimes people are making promises with I call it the Bernie Sanders move. Wait until you're in office to figure it out. Because if you really look at Bernie Sanders' political run, he never had an answer to how he was going to do anything, which to me was kind of weird, because he was a career politician for like 40 years, and a lot of his answers, and this isn't me making it up, you can go read transcripts, he was saying, I'll figure it out when I get in office and I have the experts and the data I need. That's not a convincing promise to me. And it starts to go into this realm of like, you guys are spitting in idealisms, and then you're going to get in and find out that elected officials don't have the power to move the needle you think they do.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, it creates a whole disillusionment with the little political process.
Right.
But in defense of the politicians who do this, which is not something I normally do.
No, that's what it's about. It's about understanding deeper levels. I could be wrong about anything I'm saying here. I'm just trying to better understand.
But to continue on that thought, if you're a politician in the city of Montreal, and you feel that you could make a positive contribution to your city, and you think you have the right vision and you have the right ideas, and you're existing and operating in this environment which you have extremely limited control over a variety of different issues. The thing is that if you don't, like, I guess, play the game like the opposition is, or like your opponents are, the track record is that people don't win elections by being honest with the local populace, right? It's sort of we're kind of to blame for that to a certain degree.
Well, so my question would be,
we kind of get hooked and bait with it, and then we're like, oh, that bait looks pretty
even
good. Let me play on that.
To me, like, I think it also has, that's kind of how we ended up in a place where 25% of people vote, right? Like, that's kind of.
Yeah, and I think I could even get myself into trouble for making that statement, right? Like, as people, Alex, what are you trying to say? We're dummies?
Nah. But like, the reality of the situation,
I buy into it too sometimes. Like, I voted for.
It's about idealism. Yeah. If people want to vote for what they believe in.
People want to dream, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that NDG needs to dream. We need to dream. We need to dream big. Like, we need to start dreaming.
We also need to
Dow public. I want a public market. We need to dream.
About,
we need to ask. We say, no, we want this stuff.
we can't ask for it all, but like
No, we should
I
ask for it
also
all.
think
We
we
deserve
should
it all.
also be a little realistic with certain things. And like as an example, if we're being mad honest about the current election cycle, look at how few people care. Like, look at how little people care about it in our community. So yeah, politicians play their games to win, and then the voting rate is so abysmally small, and it becomes like, do I like bike paths or not? I guarantee you a lot of people voted on such unilateral issues because like there was no real, like, I mean, at least in English. I don't know about the French side. For all I know, the French side was mad documented and I didn't see that part. But like in our community, at least, I don't really see people pursuing issues that people care about here. And then I found out that the issues are kind of boring. It is super hard to get passionate about garbage cans and bike paths.
Yeah.
But no, I hear that. But then like at the same time, maybe it's the lack of understanding of the system and the lack of honesty that just makes people not care at all.
Another excellent point. Yeah, I think they make this. I'm sorry, I gotta interrupt you. I truly believe, sincerely believe, that they make it complicated for people to understand because they really. I think there's two things at play. That in many ways, our elected representatives don't really understand how it all works, and
right.
the other thing is that it's easier to govern when you just tell people, oh, it's complicated. When someone tells you something is complicated, to me, that's a red flag. No. You make it complicated because you don't want us to understand it. And then when we ask you questions about it, that's your response. It's in exactly the way Magda Popiano responded to me last council meeting when I asked her about her 2024 budget. She said, oh, it's complicated. I said, what does that have to do with the central transfer? What does that have to do with the fact that,
that to me is a really good point. My understanding,
like, I don't get it.
Hold on,
how's that a response? I don't get it.
It shouldn't be complicated, but my understanding is we're entitled to this information, right? Like as citizens, are we entitled to this? Like I literally don't know our rights in regards to public data requests from city budgets.
The budget's the law related to access information is very weak. You make an access information request, and you have to place your faith on City of Montreal employees to provide you the data, and they'll go, okay, so the borough secretary gets your request, and he or she goes to the person who she or he thinks has the information and asks them, do you have any information related to blah 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 blah? And that city employee can look back to them and say, nah, I got no documents on that, but their computer is full of data on that particular issue. And the borough secretary or the greffier de la Ville de Montréal comes back and goes, oh, there's no documents. This is kind of like what can happen to many of the requests. Right. It really is rests on the good faith of the civil service to provide you the data that you requested. Yeah. And I just came back from I just took the city to court, the Commission d'Accès Information.
Yo, shut up, Preach and Kobia in the chat. We got somebody complimenting. We had somebody in the chat saying, keep up the local politics chat. Shut up, Preach. I mean, I think this kind of stuff is not important.
To that person that
Did made I miss all these? Oh, wow. I missed some chat stuff. Oh, Bonnie's there too. What's up?
To that person who made that comment, right? The community needs you to be engaged, and you need to talk to your neighbors. We need to drive the community conversation, because unless we do that, we're not going to go anywhere.
Preach. Remind them that on your radio show that there are city council meetings and that we should care about things like why NDG got less budget than Valerie promised us, because some of them parks is not good. I think Preach is in LaSalle, though, where they're a little tighter with their politics.
Well, this is another issue that you raised, is that some of the, for example, the former cities that merged with the city of Montreal in 2022, they had already a pre-existing community identity. And also they had their own pre-existing political network. And I think that played a lot better for them, because they weren't as, vulnerable to the pull and the demands of party politics that some of the inner city politicians are vulnerable to. Because what happens, I think that when you get into communities like Côte-des-Neiges and NDG, which is just insane, like we're 170,000 plus people, right? Well, we were 176 and we went down 170,000. Now we're at 173. That's what the data is showing me. And what happens with communities that are this large is that it becomes kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It becomes desensitized. It just becomes, it becomes like, what do they call that? And when a city becomes when you have so many people, it becomes kind of like, there's a word for it. God help me. People listening to this, help me here, please, right now.
I'm not sure which direction you're going with this.
Well, I'm saying is when you have a big city with lots of people.
That's a good point, Preach. He's pointing out, I should remind people who I'm talking to. This is Alex Montagano, a.k.a. the Train Man. Montagano, my bad.
Everybody
he's
gets
the Train Man. He'd be an NDG cultural figure at this point, but like completely non in the conventional sense. This guy is trying to be a city mascot. It'd be the best way I put him out there. Also, independent politician running against the system, all that good stuff.
Well, he
knows the policies. He knows the stuff that we didn't Google. That's really his biggest value here.
The train man gig is really a vehicle to get people's attention, because, like as you mentioned through this podcast earlier, is like people are turned off. Nobody reads this stuff. It's like boring, and in defense to all people, we're busy. We have jobs, families, we have our hobbies. We're expecting that our elected representatives are taking care of business, and that's not the case. They're not taking care of our business. And the Train Man,
we can call it a gimmick. It is absolutely a gimmick.
Is to get people's attention, and also, people who know me know that I'm an artist, trained modeler. Call you what you want, a geek, a nerd, and a lot of people.
Okay, so people may not know this. Alex has like this train set at home, like in his basement, and he has a 3D printer, and he has constructed all of these Montreal staples and NDG staples, and has created his own miniature NDG ode train thing. Like, this thing should probably end up in a museum one day for how actually cool it is.
Thank you.
So the Train Man plays into his branding. Legitimately, when stuff's dope, it's dope. And if you ever want to see it, Alex lets you come.
I have open houses. Tour. Yeah, everybody's invited. Everybody who knows me knows where I live. Right, I live on King Edward. Right, this is where I live, and I'm an NDGer. I've been an NDGer all my life. I was born on Lacombe Avenue in St. Mary's. I went to high school in NDG. I did leave Montreal. I went to Toronto for about 3-4 years to start my career, because that was just impossible as an Anglophone who knows how to speak French to do in Montreal. When I started my career, it was when Parizeau was elected in office. And that's when, it was very dark times for Quebec. And these are dark times for Quebec. Like, we're entering another era, a stage in Quebec history that's being driven by identity politics. It's being driven to a certain degree by xenophobia, it's really not a good political space to be in right now in Quebec if you're in a minority. And that's why, again, I encourage people to come out the 19th to Trainman Park, make yourself known, say, hey, I exist, I'm here. And we want a fair shake. We want to be respected for the partners that we are and that we have been in this province. And, it's not just about language. It's about our culture, our traditions, our stories, our history. And that comes back to the Train Man. The reason why NDG is here, a large portion is because we were surrounded by switch yards for trains. You had they call it the Glen, right? There's a Glen switch yard, and we have the CE switch yards up in Côte St. Luc. Trains were an important part of the economic development of Montreal, and it goes hand in hand also with the construction, the early construction of the Lachine Canal. The Lachine Canal and the Lachine Rapids, right, is why Montreal is where it is. When they came down the St. Lawrence River, when they discovered, or they say, excuse me, Jean Cartier said they discovered North America for the white man. they had to stop at Montreal because they couldn't go anymore. They couldn't go further because of the Lachine Rapids, right? So that's why Montreal is where it is. And
Right.
then the English, along with the Irish, the Scots, and the French, built the Lachine Canal, and that transformed Montreal into a transportation hub, a major North American transportation hub, and made Montreal what it was, one of the largest, most prosperous cities in North America. Back when I was a young man, Montreal was the biggest city in Canada. It was the economic and social and political capital of the country. No longer, we are no longer that, okay? And
Nope.
the reason for that, and Quebec nationalists will never want to admit to that, is because of this petty language divisions that are holding us back and having a negative impact on our economy, right?
It definitely has an impact. People might not realize how ridiculous it is. I will tell you the moment that I realized how absolutely ridiculous it got. I was working at the Super Club Videotron, and we were getting in the movies, and the movie VR came out. I don't know if you remember it, but the title of the movie was VR. It was pretty crap, but it existed. They had to call it RV in French. That wasn't even the worst one. The worst one was 300. The title of that movie is 300. Right. And they had to, for French, put 300 version français as the official title. Like, this wasn't like you can argue, but Holden, RV isn't the French term. I thought it was stupid, fine. But 300? What? It's not even the language. It's just the numbers. And they had to put the version français. So this kind of... there was a point where I think Ubisoft was considering pulling games from Montreal because of the booklet things. And you got to understand, if you don't know, Ubisoft is in Montreal. Why would... imagine that. Publishing games and we can't even get their games because of freaking booklet laws. And that was a real thing in like 08, 09 when they were really trying to crack down on like the video game industry for linguistics and things like that.
I have a personal story about that with my business. I when I registered my business in Quebec, I registered the name Restore Montreal and .com. I wanted to make the name of my company basically the hyperlink, right, to my website, because I thought, okay, why not just give people my website as my business name so they can look me up and see who I am? And so I registered the name, and they call me, well, that's not acceptable because Montreal doesn't have the accent aigu sur le. And I'm going, well, it's a hyperlink. You can't put accents in hyperlinks. And she goes, oh, that's correct. That's right. Let me get back to you on that. So she calls me back the next day. No, even if it's a hyperlink, you still have to put the accent on the E. And I'm like, okay, I'll put the accent on the E. And I did it. But, it is what it is, right?
So, like, why that stuff is wild to me is because I don't think people realize is somebody got paid for all of that. Somebody's sitting there probably making over $20 an hour.
Oh, more
for that phone call, right?
With benefits and everything, they're making like $50 an hour. The public sector in Quebec and Montreal is very well, they're coveted jobs, right? You get paid well, you have great benbenefits, you have great,
So like I'm starting to like I got a gig now where like I sell promo for restaurants. Right. Like it's really interesting to me because you start doing the invoice part, and right. One of the things we ask for is company name, and Quebec is the land of 8 digits and then some Quebec thing and like whatever, like the most standard business name. Like nobody's official business name is cool. It's just a bunch of registered numbers that yes. you have to have.
Yes.
And then your public facing name is whatever it is, but it's just constantly just, here's my registration number. I didn't try. I'm like, okay, what number's available? It's like my license plate. And it's just the 8-digit number changes for each person because nobody's actual business names can be business names.
The other thing that grinds my gears is so we're in North America, right? So leaving linguistic aside, language aside, you think that the Quebec government would just say, okay, you know what, just for like financial reporting, financial numbers, we'll just adopt the North American standard just to make life easy for everybody because we are in North America, right? No, and they didn't do that. Decimal points in French are commas. So when you're trying to take data from Quebec financial documents and cross reference them against data that's outside the province in Canada or United States, you got to go back in and change all the commas to points. And you'll think, well, what's the big deal about that? And you're like, well, why would you ever want to give people that aggravation? I just don't understand it. And I'm sure that people will argue with me, and they have, because I've kind of posted this gripe online on social media and a rant of mine, like we're all like guilty of doing it at some time in our lives. And I got some blowback on that, but I'm just like, I don't get it. I just don't understand. Like, what does it, what purpose does that serve? Is that going to solve, is that going to like protect some sort of cultural uniqueness that a decimal point or a comma is going to do that? I just, so sorry, there's another rant.
No, it's a really good point. Preach just said in the chat, that's actually a really good angle for a new public conversation about the language laws, North American standards. And as you're saying it sounds gatekeepy, because like, yes, if you know what you're doing, it's not hard to work around that, but like, it is inherently extra confusion that makes it harder for people to collaborate. And even to that end, if I'm not mistaken, Quebec sometimes calculates stats differently than other places. So there's a lack of unification. And I remember during COVID, we didn't track cases the same way as the rest of Canada. So when you're looking at the numbers, like, everyone's doing the nominal thing, because 95% of people, and I'm making this number up, but it is that high to me, of people I talk to have not done the stats classes I've done. So they don't know about nominal, ordinal, and the other layer of stats, and like how numbers are what they are, but it's all about relationships between data points. So oftentimes people have a lot of conversations about statistics based on what they're reporting on Google, but what Google is doing is summarizing reported numbers. And if you're not looking at that next level, then you're not actually realizing that Quebec was overstating cases compared to the rest of Canada at a relative comparison point of view.
Yeah, and
whether or not they're right or wrong, that's not the point. The point is that they didn't calculate it the same.
Exactly. And you need to understand the differences in order to understand the numbers. And you're absolutely correct. And this plays into how the Quebec government is tracking language. Like, for example, in the Board of CD-NDG, right? If they call if in determining mother tongue, it's like, it's incredible. It's like, all this obsession and compulsion about what your mother tongue is. So if they call, for example, I'm of Italian heritage, right? If they called my grandmother, Emanuela Montagano, God bless her soul, and asked her, what's your mother tongue? And she goes, well, what do you think is my mother tongue? My mother tongue is Italiano. But if you would ask her, right, the next question, what language do you operate in your day-to-day life, right, as a Montrealer, she would respond English. You follow what I'm saying? And this is the same thing for the Filipino community. It's the same thing for the Greek community. So they're not reporting that data that way. So when they come and they say, oh, the mother tongue, we've defined these criteria in which are determine whether CD-NDG should have bilingual status or not, they'll go, oh, but the Italians' you got an Italian community, their mother tongue is English. I mean, not English, Italian. But everybody knows that the Italian community is operating in their business language. Their language of communication is English. So this is where the stats, are designed in a way to feed a narrative.
That is a really, so basically, just to make sure people heard what that was, is that they report on mother tongue, not on, and then make decisions off of what, because when they do the census, is they ask you what your mother tongue is. And then if you put Italian, you get put in other, or Italian, or whatever stat point it is, but you're not being put in English, which is your real day language point. And what matters with that is then when you look at the census data after the fact, which does impact things like the budget, and if it is algorithmically based, as you believe, this will impact the percentage points of what we get. All those English people, or people who are predominantly English for practical conversation, are not being reported as Anglophones in the census data.
And this is true with the Philippines.
Actually makes a difference.
Yeah,
to be honest.
And it makes a huge difference. And the Filipinos make a large, they're a significant community within Cotonou NDG, more in the Cotonou side. And they're all operating in English. They're very, economically, socially, politically, they're very close and connected to the Jewish community. And it's just been a cultural connection that's existed. It's been something wonderful. And their working language has been English. So that's another, demographic that is not being reported in a way that aids us as a community in protecting our uniqueness or linguistic makeup. So,
Right.
these are the issues. So again, I gotta put a pause here, Holden. If anybody has joined this podcast just recently, please remember that there's a protest happening next Sunday, November 19th at 1:00. And, please come out. Please be heard. It's not just about Bill 96. It's not just about, the Quebec government reducing access to English universities to foreign students. It's about the larger global issue about how, as a community, minorities are being squeezed in Quebec, and we are being asked to be something that the authorities want us to be, rather than for us celebrating who we are. NDG, an amazing place, a fantastic place, everybody's welcome, where the majority of us speak both French and English and have integrated wholly into Quebec society, and we shouldn't be stigmatized for who we are. We should be celebrated.
Right.
So that's I guess the best way to describe what the protest is about.
That's a much better way of describing it than at first, in my opinion.
Well, the talk track is, you can approach it from a lot of different angles, right? Like,
no, but I think the way you describe it there sounds a lot more like an inclusive rally rather than leveraging certain language, which maybe isn't putting the right branding on it.
Yes, and as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, I want to move away from the whole English Montreal language debate, right? Because I really think it's tired. And I really think that it's about creating an open, pluralistic.
So I do have a question from Preach in the chat, and I believe you touched on it, but just to reinforce it, can federally incorporated companies in Quebec use Canadian ink loopholes to skate language laws? Like, can Quebec stop the McDonald's from being a Big Mac? Because, a Big Mac is clearly not French.
Okay, this is a big question. And I'll answer it, but I cannot answer it and say with confidence that it's 100% correct, but I think it's pretty correct. What I understand is that companies like McDonald's, Best Buy, these big companies, their companies are registered with the federal government. They have Canadian registration, and for some legal reason, this exists out of the provincial jurisdiction of Quebec, and that's why they cannot impose a certain provisions in the laws, language laws on them, and what provisions they can or cannot impose, and what's the limits or non-limit, I can't really comment on that, but I know that they've been allowed to get away with this for that reason, and I really can't comment more on that. Sorry, I really apologize.
Nah, it's fair. I mean, it's a good answer. I mean, there's clearly discrepancies in it, because even though Renee just said Big Mac is a name, though, I'm pretty sure I can't just really go and make an English name product very easily and not get a little bit of a why is it not bilingual? I mean, or is that actually a thing?
The Big Mac, I think, is a branded product. It's like calling if McDonald's can't call it a hamburger, they have to use the French name hamburger, but they can call it a Big Mac because it's a branded product. I think that's why.
So, in theory, if there's already an existing trademark that exists outside of Quebec because of it's technically Big Mac.
Well, it
has the word big in it.
I'm sure McDonald's has registered the trademark Big Mac in Quebec as well.
No, for sure.
They've registered that trademark worldwide, right? As much as they have lawyers that work probably 5 days a week protecting their branding and their trademarks internationally, right? So this is the animal you're dealing with. So.
And then also, so my theory is also McDonald's can look at Quebec and be like, "Oh, say word, you want us to dip?" And Quebec is going to be like, "No, please stay, please stay." I mean, everybody eats at McDonald's here and there. It just happens. Especially, I find I don't eat at McDonald's in the city a lot. It's when I'm on the highways and shit, and I'm trying to find something and like the truck stop has 4 options and you're like, damn, McDonald's is actually the best of these options today. That's when I really get that McDonald's.
me it's I get up very early. I'm a general contractor, so I'm up like at 4:35, and sometimes I'll have a couple of coffees and I'll bolt out of the house, and it'll be like getting 8 o'clock, and I haven't had breakfast and I'm just running out of energy, and the only place open is unfortunately to my waistline is McDonald's. And you know what? I have to say that the NEG McDonald's is the woman who works at the drive-through counter who takes my order.
Is it about the Saint Jacques one?
Yes, she's absolutely wonderful. Thank you for being so kind and gentle with me in the mornings, and thank you very much again. NDG, love you, love you, love you. And you know, it's like I have these interactions and these connections all the time in our community with business owners, with residents, and always laughing, cracking jokes, having a good time, being kind, you know, compassionate and understanding. And yes, we argue sometimes, but you know, we're a family, and we are really truly a family. And I think it's important for all of us to embrace that, because families stick together. And you know, we make things work. And if we can tap in that energy, right, we can do anything we want. It's like nothing will stop us. Nothing. No,
that's a fact. I mean, I appreciate your time today, Alex. I don't know how much later I can go. I got a couple of things I have to get done today too.
I'm good too. I gotta go. I have to.
I definitely think we should do this more regularly, because we did have people pop in, watch, leave comments, and honestly, I think that big picture, this kind of a format or platform, we can keep running it live. We'll inevitably get people to want to come in and converse more as time goes on and spread the word. So if you're watching this in the future and you made it this far into an hour, almost 2 hour long video that you saw on Thrive NDG or my Facebook page, or if you're on YouTube too, cool. Thank you, YouTube people.
You should stream this. You should stream this on my page next time as well if you can. Can you?
We can talk about that. It costs more, but because it's a tool. It's a tool for that, but we can do all that for sure.
You rock, and you know what? You are one of the characters of NDG that make this place special. And you know what?
Y'all should come out to our concerts that we're throwing, though. All you people in Thrive NDG, we trying to make music here. Because, one last point. Your 18 to 24-year-old market is dipping.
Go to the shows. Fine. Yes.
No, but like for real, the 18 to 24-year-old market is leaving. You want to talk about population dips? I guarantee you a large chunk of that's young people that don't want to stay here.
Why do you think they're leaving?
Because there's nothing to do. Because when you're in NDG, everybody cares about homeowning parents, and they don't care about what happens when those teenagers turn 16. They only care until a certain age, and then there's very little in the young adult dope category. And I agree.
We need
when
to
you do the Montreal, like the Montclair Street Festival just happened, it was not lit. I apologize to anyone involved. It's not a shot at you, but it wasn't lit. There was one year it was lit and it had like bands and stuff, but even then the music was kind of safe for work and really family. Fine, I get it. That's how it works. But if you guys want to make things pop, you need to also attract the single people that are kind of looking to like have things to do in the adult world. It can't just be for families, or you won't have real community engagement. You're just going to get that one sector of the community while the rest of us go to Saint Laurent. Because I'm on Saint Laurent a lot. You know how much of my money went to Saint Laurent and not Hurley's or whatever in DG? I digress. It's great to have you all here with us. Appreciate all of you. We all just want to see NDG pop off. We've been talking with Alex Montagano. I'll get it right. The Trainman. Also, it's rumored he may be DJ. I don't know, but I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And yeah, so we'll be back again at some point randomly in the future. We'll figure out some kind of schedule or something. And we want to make this become like a real community conversation point, because if I'm not mistaken, the city does not actually make efforts to broadcast their efforts, and city councils and all that to the people. In fact, it feels like it's really anti like having me show up sometimes. So like I want to create something where you can watch it at home, stream to your comfort. You can drink, smoke, whatever you're doing at home, or you're a parent and you're real good and you're that audience and you're just doing your normal parent stuff. I don't know, but you can be anyone you want and no one gonna judge you, and you can just get involved in the community from the comfort of your home, and we can kind of actually just discuss this stuff better and grow. And for those of you that want to see Alex get new perspectives, here's your opportunity to speak with him, and trust I know how to filter him a little bit and move him in the direction of maybe some less sensationalist and more to like what he's actually trying to say, because like Alex is on to some stuff, some really interesting, like, yo, if an investigative journalism was still a thing in English in Montreal, you would see the thing in the Gazette by now, but it's not, because English media is dead. So this is what it is now. It's
sad.
Us or nobody.
Oh, there's still Joel.
Shout out Joel.
There's still Joel.
I was about to say, shout out him. He be doing it. I'll be watching his stuff and his screenshots of his articles, and I actually do make the effort sometimes to click to the Suburban website and look for his stuff, because he really be doing it. So I want to give love to him.
He's smart. He's smart. He calls me out all the time, by the way. When I make mistakes, he catches me, and I learn a lot from him. So please read Joel. And I'm not saying this because he's biased. No, not at all. It's because he does actual real journalism.
Facts.
Something the city needs. And I have one last comment there, Holden.
Go for it.
Choo-choo.
Fair enough. Appreciate all of y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, tell your friends. It's really important for this kind of stuff to work that you share it with people and you let people know what's happening, because trust, I know how limited my reach is, and while Alex has his reach, it's really you guys sharing it with the world. So if you want us to cover stuff you care about, or I'm gonna make it open, if y'all want to jump on this, we can make that happen too. So everything's open. This is a new thing we're developing, and we'll see you soon again, NDG and / surrounding areas. Live long and prosper, everyone.
Love you.